I want to welcome everyone back to our board meeting. Our next item is item 7. It's our legislative session preparation. Turn the time over to Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones and other staff to give us an update on our legislative session business case and funding priorities. Deputy Superintendent Jones, are you ready to take the helm?
I'm ready, sir. So
Okay.
Again, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. 7.1 is a perpetual agenda item that is prior to and during the legislative session, where we ensure that we're following the board's direction and providing your funding priorities and/or business cases to the legislature. We've accomplished that very well, and here's how we know this. As of the last PEA meeting, which was held yesterday, Chair Huntsman, Vice Chair Belknap, and Vice Chair Davis all were present to ensure that your most recent changes, not along the lines of your priorities. Your priorities are still 1 through 11, and they're still the same, but you had made some changes in your Thursday board meeting a week ago to from ongoing to one time. All of those were presented. The chair summarized, and then Vice Chair Belknap went into a little bit more detail about your priorities. So that's where we're at as far as the public education committee goes. There's another meeting on Friday, and then the final meeting of the PEA on Tuesday. So it's your Thursday meeting next week that we plan to show you all of the results of the process with PEA, because again, their last meeting is on Tuesday, and that's where they'll make their final motions and recommendations to EAC. So even after PEA completes, I just want to make sure that we all, just to clarify that we all understand there's still the process with EAC, right? And the final bill of bills and how everything falls out, which we won't know for sure until the end of the session. But that's what this agenda item is intended to do, is to ensure that first and foremost, you see that staff are taking your direction and, presenting and promoting your legislative priorities for funding. The only backup in there is just those changes that were made or that showed, how much difference it was above what they had originally stated was available state ongoing and one-time funds. Because of your actions, it was significantly reduced and appreciated on the ongoing side. And there looks like, general support and recognition and appreciation for doing that. While at the same time, as you heard from the UEA representative, your first priority remains intact. So with that, Chair Huntsman, I'm open to any questions or concerns.
Okay, thank you. Member Earl.
Yeah, I have a question about, it just seems like there's a number of bills that keep showing up every day that add, and they have a new price tag for education. Is there somewhere we have I don't know if it's a running total. Do you know what I mean? When a new one shows up, that we can see what the name of it is and what exactly it's requesting. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if there's somewhere that the legislature has that as well. Maybe there's an item where that's, but like I said, even this week, there were several that were new that were $1.5 million. And anyways, I'm just curious how we can keep track of that so we can kind of just maybe balance that or keep that in mind as we're looking at different things.
Deputy Superintendent Jones.
So the answer is yes, we have that. So it was just yesterday, though, that in the PA meeting yesterday that the legislators came with their bills or their request for appropriation. So the plan is to consolidate those and make that a part of the overall summary of the PEA process in your Thursday meeting. If you do want those sum totals like more real time or made available to you, we can certainly accommodate you. The only thing that I would just say on that is that those are all subject to change. We provide the fiscal notes, and then substitute bills might come in and things like that. So that Thursday meeting after the final Tuesday PEA meeting is really where we try to provide the comprehensive PEA, but bills will continue to fly in. Deputy Superintendent Stallings can help me on that one too. But yes,
So
we can provide it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily asking in real time, but because that would be unreasonable, to be honest with you. But I guess, are you saying that all of them presented yesterday, or there's still more? I guess that's my question, right? Is there more coming out there that we may not know yet?
Deputy Superintendent Stallings, on that, can you speak to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Chair. Yes, more bills can come out and will come out that will have a fiscal impact. So there's kind of two ways that legislators can seek money. One is they can pass a bill that either has an appropriation attached to the bottom of the bill or has a fiscal impact tied to it. And then there's another route where they can just seek a request for appropriation that may not need a bill. So generally, there are people who will do both. They will run a bill and they know it's going to have a fiscal impact, and they will have both the bill and fill out what's called a request for appropriation. Once they fill out that request for appropriation, they come, they are invited to present to a committee like PEA yesterday. But to your question, although all of the presentations on the request for appropriation are done, bills still could come out that have an appropriation either embedded in the bill, or there's a fiscal impact that's noted by the agency related to the bill. So more could still come.
You have a follow-up, Member Earl?
No, that's fine.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. I think before we move off of this agenda item, it's all about process and streamlining the process and communication. And I experienced through the PEA process a great deal of appreciation for your work. So I'll pass this on to you. Starting clear back in August as you put your priorities together. And then also for the support with the quad charts that have helped. And then a good portion said, well, I've got your first request, and they appreciate the fact that we take the time and revise it to what was presented yesterday. So they appreciate they want to express their appreciation for your work there. And then of course there's all the work that staff will go through. So now we're anxious to see what happens in PEA. So thank you. It was a good experience. You have anything, Deputy Superintendent Jones, on this particular item?
Not for 7.1, but we do have a request for an action on 7.1.1.
That is correct.
Below that, right? So if we could go to Kathy Webb and Director Jake, or Assistant Superintendent Jacobson.
Yes, I'm not seeing any other hands. So we're going to go to 7.1.1, which is an actionable item, the redistribution of POPs carry forward funds resulting from public education appropriations committee presentation. So isn't it Kathy Jensen and then Deborah Jacobson?
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Kathy Jensen, Fine Arts Consultant with the Utah State Board of Education. We are requesting permission to redistribute the carry forward funds from SFY 21. We presented at Public Education Appropriations Committee a week or so ago, and it was their request that the funds be redistributed with less restrictions, and particularly the restriction that is asked to be waived in Board Rule R277-444 is the requirement that each of the 15 organizations make a 1-to-1 match on the funds that are allocated to them. As you know, COVID has had a huge impact on our arts organizations, in that many of them were closed out of their venues for months at a time. Many performers and artists were placed on furlough. The organization's financial stability was very difficult through COVID. It will be a great blessing to these organizations if they can use these funds for educational purposes without having to make the one-to-one match.
Okay. Member Earl.
So I just want clarification. This is moving into next year or the completion of this year? This would be starting today on this vote?
Kathy Jensen.
Thank you. Actually, it would be a redistribution of 21 funds for use from now until the end of this fiscal year, unless you felt it was appropriate to extend the time into next fiscal year.
Okay, so we're saying, I'm just trying to understand what that means exactly. So those schools that have exerted funds towards this would be reimbursed for the funds that they've to do on the one-to-one match?
This is funds that go directly to the 15 arts organizations that have been vetted and are part of POPs. They are the ones that expend the funds and receive the reimbursement. So it would not be for back things, but for things that they do from now moving forward.
Okay, that was my question. Are these organizations open? In other words, are we different than last year, or are they having to maintain the same thing as last year, which would benefit the funding?
Yes, they are open. The Utah Symphony just invited me to their 5th grade docent concerts, which will take place towards the end of the month. Tanner Dance is in schools presenting. All are doing face-to-face presentations, as well as on that time off. They spent a great deal of time and effort to develop virtual presentations that are really needed as far as access across the state. The groups go to every corner of the state, including Trout Creek and Box Elder, but they don't see the in-venue performances. So second best is having those in-venue performances available virtually.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a great idea to do for the use of funds. I just want to make sure we can use them, that we're still not have all these places closed. So thank you.
Member Booth.
I'm ready to make a motion, but it looks like Board Member Straight has a comment perhaps before the motion.
Well, you have the floor, and then
Thank you.
we can if he has a clarifying question on the motion. So
Great. I move that the board approves the redistribution of carry forward funds from the fiscal year 2021 POPs carry forward to the POPs and provisional POPs organizations, and bases the distribution on the percentage of each organization's part of the original allocation, and that the board approves waiving R277-444-43 that requires equal matching money from another source to support its delivery of an educational service for this distribution only.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Member Booth, would you like to speak to your motion?
I believe that the explanation that Kathy has given us has clarified everything. These arts organizations have been for years and years a mainstay in bringing the arts to the far reaches of corners of Utah, and our students have benefited greatly. Lots of dreams have been planted in the minds of aspiring young artists, and I fully support the redistribution of these carry forward funds for 2021 so that we can continue this rich and important program.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. We're discussion to the motion. Member Straight, did you want to add something or a clarifying question on?
I was just going to do the same thing that Board Member Booth did.
Okay. Thank you. Member Lear.
Speaking to my second, I agree with everything that's been said, but I'm also channeling Sid Dixon. And I think it's important that we can observe in the next year what happens and then maybe rethink this or reevaluate. So thank you for the motion.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands. We do have a motion on the floor. I'm going to end discussion and I'm going to restate the motion and prepare to vote. The motion before the board is that the board approves the redistribution of carry forward funds from the fiscal year 2021 POPs carry forward to the POPs and provisional POPs organization and basis the distribution on the percentage of each organization's part of the original allocation, and that the board approve waiving R277-444-43 that requires equal matching money from another source to support its delivery of an educational service for this distribution only. Board members, at this time, please vote. The voting is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Make sure we take our votes down. All right. Next, we are to item 7.2, request for statutory changes. Deputy Superintendent of Policy, Angie Stallings.
Yes, thank you, Chair Huntsman. Good morning, everyone. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy with the State Board of Education. In this item, this is our request for statutory changes. We just have one item today, which is an update on the school turnaround potential legislation. Just as a reminder, the board previously approved staff moving forward with draft legislation in June of last year. At the time, we didn't have the details that we have now. And so you may remember that 2 weeks ago on January 27th, staff provided an update or overview of, and maybe it wasn't the 27th. Time flies at this point, maybe it was just last week, of the school turnaround legislation. We had a request to bring it back one more time before the bill is drafted and numbered. And so, Chair, if you're all right, I'd like to turn the time over to Tracy to give a very brief just summary of what was discussed last time we met.
Okay. Tracy, are you ready to join us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is Tracy Van Deventer, Director of the Center for Continuous School Improvement. And we have uploaded for you an updated version of the PowerPoint that we shared last time we met, and received some great feedback from board members and wanted to highlight in particular a couple of changes we made. Without spending too much time, just to let you know, we moved from the appendix a list of the different types of TSI groups. It's actually in the other PowerPoint. It's in the one short school improvement redesign proposal. So slide 5 really clarifies what the TSI groups are, and we wanted to make sure you had that information because we had some questions about that. Also on that original slide deck, we made some changes to the language, making it more positive. And we also changed our 2 student groups to be more representative of the various groups that we have. And also just looking at, we have some student groups that are identified at a higher level. So for your reference, we've updated that PowerPoint that we used at our previous meeting so you can see those few changes. Now, our recommendations for statute changes are included in the next PowerPoint that's been uploaded, and that's the PowerPoint called Statute Changes Turnaround Redesign. And in this PowerPoint, we want to share with you really as simply as we can why we think these changes are required. We touched on them prior, but just to clarify, we believe the changes we're recommending will be important because it will allow us to have more schools identified and a fixed number of schools that would be identified. We also believe it allows us to provide support and services to more schools because more schools would be eligible for that support. And we also believe it would align our various school improvement initiatives across the state.
Director Van Deventer, can I?
Yes, sir.
We have one quick question. It might be on either this slide or the previous slide. Sorry to interrupt your presentation.
Absolutely.
Might benefit the group to get it while it's fresh in our minds. So, Member Klein, you have a question?
Yes, it just is about the student groups. What groups exactly?
Perfect. If you look at the one short, so Jeff, if you don't mind pulling up the other PowerPoint that's in 7.2, the one short school improvement redesign proposal PowerPoint, and you'll see on slide 5 of that, yep, that's it right there. So there are 448 schools that are identified, and that is the number of student groups in each of those categories or those student group listings. And at the bottom, you'll see the total number of groups. So that, is letting us know we have a number of schools that have more than one student group. So we've ranked them from the group that had the most designations with the students with disabilities down to the very lowest, which was the multiracial group with only 4 schools.
All right, follow-up comment?
Yes, Member Klein, follow up.
Yeah, so I just want to, I know I've said this before, but when we start to break it out by ethnicities, I really worry that gives us a skewed version of reality. The Utah State Code requires that we deal with the lowest 25% of academic achievers, and that includes people from, or students from all of these groups, instead of disaggregating by subgroups, because truly there is more diversity within each subgroup than there is between groups. So I know this is the route, the road everybody has told us to go down these days, but I fundamentally disagree with this approach. So I won't be voting on this.
Thank you so much for your comments, and wanted to highlight that we wanted to share this list of groups. They are recommended and brought to us from the federal guidelines following up with No Child Left Behind. And we do have our students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged. We have a number of groups there as well that are not by race, but you're right. We've been given some direction about using these as our student groups to provide support for.
Okay. Well, please continue.
Excellent. So we'll jump back to the other PowerPoint. Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. So as we look at the 3 reasons why we think these changes are more schools and a fixed number of schools, we also believe it'll widen our ability to provide support for various schools that might not currently be eligible, and then making sure that we're doing our best to be efficient and align our programs. Next slide. So the changes to the identification on the left, you'll see we have our lowest performing 3% statewide for 2 consecutive years. But that has actually hindered our ability to have the largest number of schools possible because of the overlap with other programs. So we have 2 new types of designations that we believe will allow us to have that fixed number and more groups identified. And that would be the lowest 10 non-Title I schools who perform and are identified based on 3 years on average. And then we have 5 non-Title I schools that have the highest number of TSI groups inside of their school. And that would be, as mentioned at our last presentation, voluntary and an application-based basis. Next slide. In looking at exit criteria, we do not see a need for a change on the group that has the 10 lowest performing non-Title I schools. We'll use the existing exit criteria. But because we are introducing the voluntary application-based group, and that is focusing on our TSI groups, we are suggesting that we follow the already existing exit criteria for our TSI schools, and that is that those schools must raise the performance of those student groups above the lowest 5% for 2 consecutive years. Next slide. And another recommendation that we completely are in support of and agree with is, instead of continuing the reference to these schools that join us, no more would we refer to them as turnaround or low performing school, but instead recognizing the hard work and the positive changes that are taking place. So the group that is the 10 lowest performing schools, that as they continue their work, we see them as our state springboard schools, and those that are our 5 TSI voluntary application-based schools, we see those as our state elevate schools, and believe that it's important that we change the perspective in the support that we're receiving and providing. And that's the short version of the changes that we're recommending, and we appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, a lot of hands going up. Member Moss.
Thank you. Director Vandeventer, can you just explain, and I apologize if I missed this, we are expanding, as I understand it, the pool of those schools that will be brought in for assistance. What remains of the enforcement here for possible closure? Where do we stand on that? If a school does not exit after X number of years, what consequences do they face? I know we keep them in the program and offer additional supports, but what's the downside, if you could address that? And I do have a follow-up, but I'll come back to that one after everybody else.
Thank you, Board Member Moss. We actually are not making any changes, or do not recommend any changes to that portion of the statute. It is outlined that more rigorous options would be available. It is not necessarily clear what those more rigorous options would be. So if a school doesn't exit, there will be a review panel that will consider what the needs of the schools are. Previously, schools have continued on with support. Some schools have received additional, more intensive root cause analysis to identify perhaps what might be holding the school back from further support. And then there's kind of a generic, more open-ended option that, more rigorous options could be considered. And certainly school closure is one of those that's listed. It has not been something that's been taken advantage of at this point. Some districts have made that decision on their own, but we do not recommend any changes to the more rigorous option list that's provided in the statute at this time.
Do you have a follow-up, Member Moss?
If I could, and recalling from memory, those options I don't think were outlined in what we've been looking at. We've been looking more at how to bring schools in and how to help them. But could you just refresh my recollection on what those other possible negative consequences are? We've talked about the support side, the upside, which I think is terrific. As we're expanding the pool of schools that go in there, I worry a bit about subjecting them to, the downside, the teeth.
Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to pull up the code right now in 53E5. I think it's 306. But I am going to, it does not seem to be there. So I'm sorry, I don't have this at the ready.
Perhaps we could come back. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I appreciate that. And that's my concern. But thank you for,
okay. Thank you. I will provide you with that specific reference so you can see the outlined list.
Okay, Member Cannon.
Thank you, Chair. Tracy, I wonder if you could just comment for us on how these changes to the state turnaround designations and TSI and CSI, how do these interface with what the federal government's program is? And I believe the federal designations were TSI and CSI, but anyway, could you tell us how we're meshing these two together?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Board Member Cannon. We already in our CSI identify on a 4-year cycle, new CSI, Comprehensive Support and Improvement schools. And that would be very similar to our 10 lowest performing schools, which are now our state springboard schools. So they would follow on that same cycle. The difference would be that our CSI schools are ranked according to Title I schools, and that is not highlighting the needs of non-Title I schools that might also fall within that low performing area. And then in the TSI and the federal side, we already have that same yearly or annual designation. Again, though, the support if a student group does not exit is limited to just Title I schools. So by providing this opportunity to have state elevate schools, then our non-Title I schools would have access to resources and support, even though they're not a Title I. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, well, what I'm understanding then is that TSI and CSI are federal designations that are limited to Title I schools, and that our state is taking a look at it and opening up these designations to non-Title I schools as well. Did I understand?
Yeah, very close. I think the only change I would make is that TSI designation is for non-Title I and Title I both, but the support that's offered if a school, their student group does not exit, is limited to Title I. So we want to expand that. So those schools that already are designated as TSI and happen to be not a Title I school, we want to actually open up more resources and make them available. So that would be a specific change here in our state program.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Hutchings?
Thank you, Chair. Permission to ask 2 different questions.
Okay. Let's do your first.
First one is, again, kind of back to the identification, and I just want to make sure I understand the formula you're using to identify the 10 lowest performing schools. Do you run the numbers, you look at the lowest 10, and those are the lowest 10, or is part of that formula then to look at how many of those 10 or more have the most subgroups? And then is there leeway in those subgroups for us to change the subgroups, or are you saying those are federally required subgroups? That's one question.
Perfect. So as you look at the chart that's on the screen right now, and you have the 10 lowest performing schools, those are not addressing actually student groups at all, although there may be some student groups within that school or each of those schools. That is not part of the calculation. And instead, what happens in our CSI schools is that we pull out our Title I schools, and they're ranked, and the lowest 5% of Title I schools are identified. And in this case, we would do the same, but for our non-Title I schools. We would look at our non-Title I schools and rank them and look at that average over 3 years, those that fall in the lowest 10. So it's a fixed number of schools each year, they would be designated. Does that help?
Member Hutchins, do you have a follow-up on your first question?
No follow-up, that was
Okay.
good.
Then your second question?
Second question, can you give us a little more detail on the level of support that you're receiving for this from non-Title I schools?
I'm sorry. So the question is what kind of support we're currently receiving for non-Title I schools?
Yes.
So actually no separate support is provided for non-Title I schools.
Oh, that's not
Sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The question is more from the field. Do you have non-Title I schools that are coming to you saying, we need this kind of support? And if you do you have a feel of what percentage of those non-Title I schools feel like they would like this kind of support?
Thank you for restating. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So my understanding is in our stakeholder groups, we've received some conversations around the need to support our non-Title I schools, but it wasn't specific to the state, non-Title I schools, but it wasn't specific to the state turnaround program. So in just hearing that there were limited options for non-Title I schools to tap into resources, we used that information from stakeholder feedback sessions to help us recognize that that's a group that's been underserved.
follow up really quick?
You know, one sec to the question. I think Superintendent Dixon also may have a comment or on that.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. And I think this is such a great question and critical for all board members. Director Van Venter already addressed it, but this is something we have been hearing for years, just working in the schools and consistently hearing it, that there's this group of schools, you hear them called bubble schools, or, you know, they go by, they label themselves in a variety of ways, but they have a number of the same factors as schools who receive Title I funds, and yet don't have the level of support that they need or would like to help them improve outcomes for students. So it's a traditionally long-standing cry that we've heard, and the most recent feedback groups have punctuated that for sure, especially with the last few years taking place.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up, member?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, is this cry coming from non-Title I schools or from groups that are concerned about the needs of non-Title I schools? It's sounding like it's groups that are concerned about the needs of Title I schools, but not necessarily the non-Title I schools themselves.
I think that there has been limited, not very much feedback from non-Title I schools that have TSI groups that are struggling. However, overall, non-Title I schools have asked for additional support overall for school improvement. So we've been doing more of that matchmaking. It hasn't been a specific request from the field in that vein.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Member Earl?
Okay, so I would love it if it were this non-mandatory. So let me just throw an idea out here, okay? What if we notified the lowest 10%, or not, the lowest 10 schools that they had until April 15th? I don't know, I'm just throwing a date out there. If they want to participate in this program, they can reach out and be part of it. Otherwise, we'll extend it to others because we want them to be part of the elevated program. The part I don't like about this is the mandated part. It's this idea, now you've got to try to get out of something. I really think we're better off providing the resources and allowing people to engage and improve upon and be part of something important. Just philosophically, I think we're going to end up with schools mandated in this who are not going to be happy about it because it classifies them as a low performing, even with our new definition. I just think the language needs to be different. I'm all for helping any groups that need help, and we got the money to do it, and we have the resources to do it. If they will choose it, they will engage at a different level, and then we can engage with them. And maybe that is a motion I need to make, but I think it's got to be different than compelling. You're going to get a different result. So those are my thoughts. Okay, I do have a question. Let me get to my notes here real quick. Where do these non-Title I schools that we're looking at, and I don't know if you've looked at the numbers, I don't know who they are. Where do they actually fall in the system? In other words, are they the lowest? They obviously aren't in TSI, or we wouldn't be identifying them differently, right? So where do they fall in our system? Are they even in the lowest 30%? Do you see what I'm saying? Are we really getting to the basic needs? That's question one. And then if you want to answer that, and then I have just one last question after that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Based on our modeling at this point, we actually have about half of our schools that are in the lowest 5% that are not Title I. So they are often below many of our Title I schools that are identified, but they're not eligible to receive support because of the limitations that we have from the federal side of the funding. So I believe that they are equal to or in as much need as our Title I schools.
Okay. And then, oh shoot, that gets me thinking, and that's dangerous. Sorry, now I've lost my second question. I'll have to.
When you find it, I think there's some more discussion. Different.
Okay.
Laura, your hand's down, right?
Yes, I'm going to put it back up after Ms. Molly.
Okay. Member Hart.
I guess I was asking for clarification. If you can go a slide back, I think, where it said, no, maybe it's down. It's where, yeah, that slide. So are you saying on the right-hand column, only the 5 non-Title I schools with the highest number, only that part is voluntary, and the lowest 10% or the lowest 10 non-Title I schools for 3 years is not voluntary? Is that correct?
Tracy, can you answer?
Yes, Board Member Hart, that is our recommendation, that we do identify the lowest 10 non-Title I schools based on a 3-year average, and that would not be voluntary. And then we would have 3 years of voluntary application-based support for those 5 non-Title I schools in the interim years.
I would like to echo what Member Earl was saying. In order to change, you have to be ready and willing and able to take that on. And I am familiar with schools that are not identified Title I because their district has chosen to maybe focus on elementary schools, or they just missed the mark. So I do believe there is a desire out there for support. And I would much rather somebody that is ready, willing, and able to be part of this than somebody taking up that spot that, for whatever reason, is just not in the right space in order to make change happen. So I thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to offer that idea.
Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of clarifying questions, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so one that I have is in statute, what does it require when you say the 3% here, lowest performing? Where do these two align? How many do we have in there, and how many additional would this be?
So Board Member Belknap, right now we have been looking at the lowest 3% who are not already designated, and that resulted in 2 schools this last cohort. And we believe that that number will not grow significantly because the schools are already being designated for other services or supports through our CSI program, which is our lowest 5% of our schools. So this would give us a fixed number and would increase that from 2 to 10 or 2 to 5, depending on the year of that designation. Does that help?
Clarity, the 3% is what's required in statute, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then the next question I have is, I know that we as a board already took a vote to have our staff go look for somebody to work on the existing or additional information on turnaround schools. Where are we in that, and what kind of guidance could we give you to help support that with also allowing these schools to be voluntary?
Tracy.
I'm not sure that I am prepared to answer that question, unfortunately. I know that what we've been looking at is supporting the schools at this stage with the 2 programs that we have in front of us. So because we've had a 2-year gap in designation of new schools, I know instead we've been supporting those schools that are on the tail end of their programs. And that's a different perspective and a different feedback. So I apologize that we don't have more information in regards to that work, other than the feedback we've been receiving from our stakeholder groups that we've asked to come together to look at overall school improvement and to build more alignment across the various programs.
Okay. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, hands raised. Are you going to respond to Vice Chair Belknap's question?
Yeah. Yes, that's what I was planning to do, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, please.
So we have a bill file that was requested and opened quite a while ago, but we knew and wanted to bring these updates to you before there was a numbered bill so that you all had an opportunity to look at it. We will be meeting. Our next steps are hopeful to meet with some legislators who've been very invested in the school turnaround program to share what has been shared with you the 2 weeks ago and today. And we can share the feedback about the desire for the whole program to be voluntary. Just knowing the history of the program, I will say from the beginning was that it absolutely be mandatory designation. I think we were excited to have kind of this half and half, but we would be happy to also share the desire to make the whole program voluntary and see if that is something the legislators would support.
Chair, clarity?
Yes.
Thank you. So what you're asking is to get rid of that mandatory 3% and move it over here to 10 lowest performing schools, and literally lowest performing, not by designation of students, correct?
That's correct.
And so is there much change from the 3% to the 10 lowest being in a requirement?
I think that the change would be that we're focusing on 9 Title I schools and that we have a fixed number so that it would make sure that we are identifying and supporting as many schools as the funding would allow.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hold a motion. Thank you.
Okay. We have quite a few hands still raised. I'm gonna go to Member Hanson, who hasn't participated yet in the discussion. Member Hanson.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate the presentation, appreciate the efforts on trying to improve this historically messy program that we've had. Just based on my experience and with the program, I really think that we'll have a rough go with the legislature trying to make this a totally voluntary process. I think that, and I tend to agree that we have an obligation as a state board to support the schools that are at the lowest and weed them out, I guess, in some way, take some action if they continue to perform at a very low level over a long period of time. So I would speak in support of the first item that's on the screen, that, taking the lowest 10 9 Title I schools for 3 years on average. I think that would be a great move that would make the effort that we undertake manageable instead of having it be variable and difficult to manage as it is now. With regard to the voluntary part, I think Jim brought this up and I had been thinking about it as well. I'm not sure how many schools would volunteer to participate in a program where they could potentially have a charter terminated or something at the end. So I really think on the voluntary side, which I fully support, it would be wiser to split that out of this piece of legislation and maybe handle it with a separate piece of code that says, that money will be allocated for support for schools, continuous improvement. Schools can volunteer to participate in it, but not have that heavy-handed piece at the end where they could potentially have some really dire consequences. I'd have a hard time as a school administrator in volunteering to potentially, undergo some of those harsh sanctions that come at the end of this. So that's my piece for today.
Member Straight.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Has this been vetted through APAC? Or
They are aware of the request that we're making, but they have not had a formal discussion about modeling. Instead, we've been using this as an opportunity to gather feedback about preferences and try to get a little more tightened down, if you will, before it comes forward for their feedback and their votes.
Thank you. I know Board Member Belknap has a motion that she is holding.
Go ahead, Brent, take it.
No, I would suggest that we send this to APAC for review, but I'm not going to make that motion.
So you're making a motion to send it to impact?
Well, Laura already has one that she wants to do. I guess she is.
Okay, well then,
Anyway,
okay. We still have some hands raised. Let's Member Lear.
I feel like we're kind of blowing up this situation in the middle of the game. I can mix metaphors, but I tend to agree with Angie. I tend to agree with Scott that I don't know when we want to start this discussion. Now seems the wrong time. And I also had some concerns with this. I was going to talk to Tracy and time ran out, but my concern is maybe more of a middle ground, but also needs more discussion. And that is, I'd like to see giving more options to these schools. There's a lot of money that goes to them. And I've heard from several schools that are turnaround schools that they feel like they could do better what they have to pay high-paid consultants considerably to do. And I know that's not something that would necessarily sit well with the legislature, but if we're going to really upend this program and have more discussions, I'd like that to be in the mix also. But right now, I think we're really just throwing a lot of dynamite at this situation, and I would probably prefer a more temporary motion that's along the lines of what Tracy's proposing. And so I'll just wait for that motion and see if I can support it. But I absolutely think this bears more discussion now that we've had several years of experience with it.
Okay. There's Member Earl, Moss, and Belknap. I'm trying to keep them all as their hands are being raised. Member Earl?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why, if this is something people are clamoring to get into for help, but then when we're saying it's voluntary and we're saying, well, though they won't want the help, I don't think that's true. I think if you put 10 slots are open, here's the schools who could qualify for this. If you're not interested in qualifying, we have 5 more schools that will open this up to at this date. I think you would be surprised at who would be interested in this versus who's compelled into this. I know that just with our reading this year, the program that we've put funding into, it's completely overwhelmed some individuals just because of what they have going on at their schools. When you allow people to choose, they will make a choice that will benefit their school. I think that the first round should be 2 years, a 2-year program with the possibility of extension if they want another extension, and then we add others in so that they're elevated. It's a completely different philosophical view. It's not compulsion. I think you're going to find schools wanting to participate. I don't know if Laura has a different motion. If not, I'll make a motion. So.
Well, you had the floor where Robert's rules here.
All right, I would make a motion that we support this endeavor, but that it's voluntary with a date for those to respond who are interested in participating. At that date, if schools have not notified Tracy, then we open it up to additional schools for the upcoming year, that it's a 2-year program with a 1 possible year extension. We can look at adding on as we move forward into a year of this, and we allow those schools to make a choice instead of being compelled.
Hang on a sec. That's a
Okay,
long.
that was pretty.
Yeah, that was intense. Okay, well, Member Earl, you.
Let me see if I can't read that small, but
follow this through to make sure it meets your intention, so I don't interrupt you. What's being written on the screen.
I know it's called school turnaround. Is there any way we can elevate it literally? Change that language? I guess it has to probably be that for this, but I do think that that is the key thing, is it's a different language because this is different. So leads to the same results, but different. Present program. Terry, and just that for the bottom, for the 10 that would qualify, 10 qualifying, there'd have to be a.
But wouldn't that be in the process, Jenny, rather than the motion?
It could be, yeah, it could be, sorry.
Thank you.
Would you, Board Member Belknap, would you also say that we need to say it's a 2-year, understanding it's a 2-year program with one possible extension, or do you feel like that's already built into the process as well?
It's in there.
Okay, perfect.
I think the intent from your discussion, if I can be helpful at all, I think this meets the intent of your concern and also of what you want to move forward to the group as a motion. Member Earl. Hang on one sec. We've got a hand up from staff. Dr. Norman.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we had clarification from Director Van Deventer about the requirements that are legally obligated and some of the things that are in place that we can and cannot do. So the requirement that we have for those schools that are currently in turnaround in the legislation and the federal requirements that are surrounding that this motion would actually not be able to be made as is. Director Van Deventer, would that be possible, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. It does require more time, and so that those changes would need to be made within the school turnaround and leadership legislation. And it would also address about the designation. That language would have to be to clarify that it's a voluntary program along with the timeline for the identification. So it would require additional changes, not impossible, but it would go into a larger shift within that code for sure.
Okay. I'm going to read your motion, Member Earl, and there's a lot of things down in the weeds also, but the motion is that the board approves staff moving forward with the school turnaround legislation as described in the staff presentation, but recommends the full program. Would it be voluntary? I'm not the best at all of this, and we have a lot of attorneys where words matter, but I believe that's the intent of your motion. Is there a second? Am I hearing a second? I have a lot of hands raised.
Second, Hymas.
Okay. You want to speak to your motion, Member Earl, any more than you have, or do you want to?
I've probably already spoken to it enough. I do think we need to philosophically change this program. I do think we have a lot of schools that need help, and in changing the way we do it, I believe we will address those needs. We already have schools that are compelled to be in for various things. This is an extension, and it's a good extension in that it allows those that are also in need to be part of that. I think we're going to find that they're going to want to do this, and I understand that there may be some strings at the end. We need to make sure we understand what those are and whether those need to be changed.
Okay. Discussion to the motion, Vice Chair Belknap.
No, Chair, it's not to this motion.
Okay. Member Hanson.
Yeah, I'll speak against the motion, not against the idea of it being voluntary. I just think that these are really significant structural changes that we're proposing. I'd like to hear from staff if we can ask the question as to this logistics of really trying to get this done in this session. My preference would be that we take this back and run it through a committee and come up with something that's a little bit more well thought out, I guess, rather than restructuring all this on the fly as we've tried to do. So I won't be voting for this, and probably won't be voting to move anything forward right now on this.
Okay. Member Klein.
So I'm sticking with what I originally said, based on the way the data is disaggregated in order to come up with the schools that need it most. But I do appreciate Jenny's thoughtfulness in putting forward an idea that is based on voluntary instead of compulsion to improve our schools. So, but I won't be voting on this or the original motion either.
Okay. Member Hutchings.
Could I make a substitute motion?
Yes.
I move that the board, help me with the wording, I want to do what Member Hansen just said, that the board returns this idea to a committee to work on it some more. Perfect. Thank you.
So this is a motion to commit this to a committee. So just so that you guys know. So it's a motion to commit, and it's
Second by Member Cannon.
okay. We're cleaning this up just a little bit. Before you hit the second button there, Member Cannon. The motion is to commit the statutory request to a committee for further review and discussion. Is there a second?
Cannon.
Okay, you're still good. You want to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. And I understand very well the timing, and this will probably run it out of time for this legislative session. But it's obvious that there's a lot of concern and about this, and some things need to be fixed. And at the same time, it could be a wonderful opportunity for many schools to participate in improvement. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Superintendent Dixon, hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. From staff, I just want to get clear. So if this goes back to committee, then what we're essentially saying that we'll miss the opportunity to have legislation change this year. I just want to be clear if that is the sponsor of the motion's intent, that we then are not seeking any legislation to improve turnaround this year.
Maker of the motion, you understand the intent or the?
I do, because I don't think it will pass as it is. So I would like to keep the discussion going so we can have something that will pass for next year.
Okay, discussion. Member Straight and Member Moth, then Moth. Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. I would like to suggest to Board Member Hutchings, and this is a friendly request for an amendment, is that since we're not concerned with this year, that let's just take the step and send it to APAC. And let's get their feedback before, and then have it come back to a board committee from there.
That makes it even better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm without objection to the maker of the motion and the second.
It's double A.
The second, Member Cannon, are you still good? So it's a motion to
I was in the APAC meeting last week, and I'm just trying to check my notes to see if this was it was briefly discussed in APAC.
The motion would say that the motion to commit would be that this would go to APAC and also to
okay, I know that it was discussed in APAC at their last meeting. Their meetings, I believe, are quarterly, so it would be a while for them to do something. So I think that we could get the information that was spoken of in APAC, because I have notes on it here, and I know they're aware of it, but I would ultimately like to see it in a committee.
So the committee should still be in there. He was adding that, so it would be a motion to commit to APAC and then also one of our standing committees. Is that what I'm thinking was the intent? That
Yes,
We had at the beginning.
I would be fine to second that.
Okay, so can we have a reference to one of our committees in the motion? Make our writer here. Is that Jeff?
Could you say that one more time, Chair?
So shouldn't we reference one of our own committees in here? One of our standing committees? Thank you. I think that was the original Member Hutchings. And then a friendly amendment that without objection from the maker of the motion, and also the second would, that it would also go to the APAC. Okay, that's how I'm seeing it. Is this, are you fine with
Looks
this
good.
for the motion, Members
Yeah.
Hutchings?
Yes, looks good. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll get into more discussion. Member Moss?
Thank you. And my video is silent because I'm having trouble with the connection, but I was going to speak to the prior motion. I'll speak in favor of this motion, and partly just to address a question of this voluntary nature. There's the voluntary entry within the program. I would hope we might consider including proposed changes to section 303 to allow a school to select a willing LEA mentor rather than a approved turnaround expert from outside. And that's not.
Let's, okay.
Did that come through okay, Chair?
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Booth?
Before I'm ready to vote, I feel that we need to consider what this motion is going to do for the children of the schools currently in the program, or that should be entering into we don't like the term turnaround, but the program as it currently exists, or as it's being proposed, it will exist. I don't want I don't want a full year to go by for these children to not have the support that they need, and for staff to be able to provide the support that they need to support. I mean, we might as well say, okay, well, if we want to not compel, but we want them to be organized, eager to accept this opportunity, we could say, well, WPU only comes with schools that perform at a certain level, and then you'll have to apply for these funds in order to be able to function as a school. I mean, I'm just feeling like we're kind of all over the map. I'm worried about kids. That's my comment. Thank you.
Vice Chair Davis?
I took my hand down, but
Oh, all right.
I'm wondering if we should table this for 1 week.
Go ahead.
I had taken my hand down, but I'm just,
Okay.
I had taken my hand down, but I'm wondering if we should try to table this for 1 week so that there can be some offline conversations and
Well, we have
some brainstorming and strategizing, but I see 2 other hands up. So maybe someone has the silver bullet compromise that's going to help do what Randy says and pull all this together and get a acceptable plan to move forward.
All right. Well, Vice Chair Belknap.
I wish I had the magic bullet. However, there's a couple of things that I want clarity on. I'm a little disconcerted about this, that we already gave staff direction to be working on this. Plus there was intent legislation on this last year to try and look and see how this could be a better program for our students. Number one is we have financial amounts. I think it's $7 Kay, on this, that would continue to go to, I'm trying to think of the right word, the approved groups. They couldn't voluntarily pick somewhere else because statute wouldn't allow that. And what about schools who would have to be assigned this year because we're required by statute to do that? We wouldn't have an opportunity not to do that.
So maybe the question I heard from the previous board members is on the opportunity side, and I'm not sure if our expert can mention that. We have what's already presently in statute, a stall or delay for a year to hammer out everything. What are the consequences and or proposed betterments in this pause moment that's definitely going to happen if these motions move forward? So can you speak to that, Tracy Vandeventer, please?
Thank you, Chair. I want to clarify that we began this discussion and presentations both to the board here and to legislators and other members because this coming year already in statute, we have one more year of pause due to COVID. Now, how legislative body wants us to use those funds has not been clarified. This past year, legislative body took the money that was originally set up to be part of turnaround and gave it to one of our continuous improvement expert vendors, and that has become a program that will be running for 3 years. However, it's not clear what this new funding will be set aside for. We've made a request to have that money to be able to pilot one of our 2 groups that we are proposing in this suggestion here. So it wouldn't be holding off designation any more than it has already been put into statute. So at this point, we try to get a little heads up before we have to identify new schools. And at this point, we're just waiting for how the legislative body wants us to use the funding that typically has been set aside. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it is already on hold and is already being paused. It in the past has been provided for a voluntary program, and 25 schools opted in, 20 remain at this point after 1 year. Again, we could certainly work with legislative body to come up with another opportunity like that, and we just have not heard yet what their intentions are.
So Chair, may I make an alternate motion, please?
Yes.
Thank you. So I would like to make the motion that the board directs staff to work with legislators on potential amendments to the Utah Code as we have discussed them.
Okay, now we just had a very interesting Robert's Rules training the other day. I don't know if you guys remember that, with an emphasis on corporate America and not a government entity and or a court with reference to our bylaws and then also what we have in state law. But so our parliamentarians should tell me where are we at on this? We've got original motion. Then from Member Earl, we have a motion to commit. And then that had a second. And then Vice Chair Davis referenced, but I didn't recognize a motion to table. But there was.
For 1 week.
What's that?
Only for 1 week.
For 1 week, but I didn't get a second. So. In that, and then in my notes here, it was like maybe I thought it was more of a maybe and not a direct motion, that maybe we were better off Vice Chair Davis. So I didn't take it as a motion, and so I didn't call that out. So Vice Chair Davis's motion to table for 1 week was not accepted by the group with a second.
I would second that.
I know, but I didn't. So then we're going to Vice Chair Belknap, the board direct staff. So
Chair Huntsman,
Yes.
the motion made by Vice Chair Davis is actually considered seconded because you continued to discuss after it was made.
Oh, look at you, Jack.
But it becomes what? One more time on that.
Without a second, if you continue to discuss the motion, it is considered implicitly seconded, which you all did. So it is technically
Because
seconded.
we spoke. We spoke after. Because we said one word according to Robert's rules. All you have to do is have a noise or a word or speak. It becomes that the body takes it as a second. You're correct. So here we are. We're in a challenge. So I'm going to go back before I take a second on that. Oh, well, we spoke after she said it. So now it's on the table. Correct?
Let's go back to vice chairs and look for a second.
Yeah, I don't think we can recognize two competing motions that aren't, there's no hierarchy at the same time. I will second Vice Chair Davis's motion if you'll take a second.
I'm gonna take a second on Vice Chair Davis's motion and recognize you as a second. Vice Chair Davis, do you want to speak to your motion?
I think that we have too many mixed opinions going on right now. We have a situation where a lot of people want the view of this. If the support is great, which we know and understand it is, then let's figure out a way to message it. And it's difficult to say we're going to force everybody into it and put heavy-handed consequences if you don't pass it, but you should come and want this. So I just think we need some time to talk about it and maybe come up with some kind of a compromise motion, and also understand that there are millions of dollars that are going to be left on the table that could potentially go somewhere else or to private entities and not be used to direct to the very thing and support and help that the money could do. But there's a clear feeling from the board that we don't want this to be like a hammer over people's heads. So we've got to take a week to figure it out and talk about it and regroup and then ask for some statutory changes. If we have time to do that, and we haven't heard from staff if we have that time or not, depending where it falls in the process.
So actually, to follow what we've just learned in that last Robert's rules, for the intent that you have, Vice Chair Davis, that would be a motion to postpone for 1 week.
Yeah. Postpone for 1 week.
I stand corrected.
Are you okay with that being your motion?
Absolutely.
And is the second good?
Are you asking me?
I'm good with postpone.
Okay, thank you. We're all in this together. So that is a motion that's before you spoke to that motion. I'm putting that motion, that's a motion that's on the table right now. So with our parliamentarian here, a motion to postpone is debatable, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what we'll be doing right now. Vice Chair, let's see, Member Hart. You're muted, Member Hart.
She took her hand down, Chair.
I did take my hand down. That wasn't why I raised my hand.
Okay. Member Hanson.
I'll speak in favor of the motion to postpone. I think there are some details that we need to work out so that we can give staff good direction about how to get this through the legislature. It's unfortunate that we are where we are because I think staff has come to us early with this and we haven't gotten into the details until now, which is bad on us. But I I don't see a united voice from the board or something I think will get through the legislature at this point. So I think the points that need to be discussed in this coming week are the voluntary versus mandatory nature, or whether we could do some sort of a hybrid, the consequences at the end, and then the use of funding for a designated vendor portion. I've heard those 3 points raised. There may be others coming from the meeting, but we should get that information to staff and then do our best to put this together in the next week so that we can get something to the legislature. If that's not possible, then we do have the option to move this back to committee, which we could do today, but I think taking the week to see if we can save it is probably a wise course. The money on the table is something that I appreciate being made aware of, but I understand there's $9 million in funding that would go basically into the old program if we don't do something now. So speak in favor.
Okay. Member Hutchins?
I would actually like to speak in favor of this motion too. If we can save it for this year, I think we should try.
Okay. I'm not seeing any of the hands raised. I'm going to state the motion, then we're going to vote. But before I call, I invite those that are very enthusiastic about what this should include and not include to do your very best in working with staff in preparing proposed motions before next week's meeting. So that if this motion passes, then that opportunity will be yours. So before we vote, I'll state the motion. The motion is to postpone for 1 week to be considered in the board meeting on February 10th, 2022. All those in favor, please vote. Or no, all those, oh no, board members at this time, please vote. I keep forgetting we're electronic here. I'm seeing that the motion passes with 1 no vote, and that was Member Klein. Is that how you see it, Vice Chairs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, we're still moving here.
Great, Chair. Now we'd be moving on to item 7.3. Is that what you'd like?
Yes.
And that's the discussion of 22 general session legislation. How much time would you like us to just go, and you'll just let us know when to stop discussing?
You're on 7.3. So we have, I think you give a quick update as best you can, see if we have some questions, and then we still have 7.4. So I'm hoping that we are a little bit behind, but I think we'll be okay if we can break for lunch at 1. So can you give a?
Yes, I'll just start rolling through, and then you just let me know when you'd like to stop to take time for board member motions. So the first bill, SB 145, Reading Competency Benchmark Assessments. And just as a reminder, before I start on all of these, all of the bills with the bolded and underlined titles, those all relate to a previously board approved request for statutory change. So I wanted to, and it has that footer now at the bottom in case you forget in future weeks. So the first bill, SB 145, the Reading Competency Bill, this, as you may remember, will just change the grades that the Acadience licenses are available for from up to grade 6 through up to grade 8. So it's really just that change of grade 6 to grade 8. And I can move to the next one if you'd like, or pause.
You know what, I'm looking at the interest of time here, and I think if we're going to try to wrap this up at 1 o'clock, that if you can just I think you need to finish where you're at, but I think we need to go to positions, or we will not be, let's just see what, if anyone has any insight here for about 10 minutes, and then let's get into the position part of this. So we do have a hand, we have a couple of hands raised. Let's just get into those. Member Cannon.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm just reacting to what Deputy Superintendent Stallings was talking about, where we have before us bills that are in bold and they're underlined and they're things that we have requested. And this week I was reading in the newspaper about HB 211, which was one of our voted on priorities for funding. And the newspaper reported that the State Board of Education had no position on this. So I would just like to make a suggestion to board leadership that when a legislative session begins and we have bills that have come forth that we have requested, or bills that have come forth that we have already voted on as a priority, if they're all in alignment, could board leadership present them to us maybe as a group, or we could divide them if you wanted, but it seems like it's so hard for us to get to each one individually to vote a position on. And some of these things that we've already discussed, we've already placed in priority, we've already approved. If leadership could present that to us, you know, in a way to streamline our taking positions of support on those, I would appreciate that as a board member, and I think it might help us moving forward. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Vice Chair Davis.
Oh, I just raised my hand when you said we were moving to actions. I have a position action, but I do have one quick thought about the bills. I think most of the things that are requested in our top 11 priorities, Chair, those are communicated as such when they're presented to the legislature, but sometimes there are some differences in language. For example, I believe 211, they eliminate, and I believe our priority says reduce, but I could be totally wrong. Laura's shaking her head no, so I could be wrong. Forget I said it, that. I'm just still in queue for a position.
Is everyone getting in queue? Is this what I'm seeing? That, okay. I remember, Earl, I'm not getting a nod.
No.
You
Yes,
have a question? Yeah.
Nope.
You're in.
Nope.
All
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
Okay. Angie, please continue for one more minute.
Okay, back to the screen. The other bill that 265 charter school agreements and renewals. You may remember the legislative audit on charter school governance. One of the recommendations from the audit was that Utah have a renewal process and be like the rest of the states in the country, where charter agreements will periodically be required to be renewed by their authorizer. This bill would allow authorizers to have that be a 3-year, 5-year, or up to a 10-year renewal process, 3 years for the newer schools, 5 years standard schools, and then 10 years or up to 10 years for high performing charter schools. This was again related to a request for bill statutory request that we had earlier. Would you like me to keep moving?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to have it end, or we won't. We better get into our action. But I know we can follow, and we can. It's our job to follow and not go through all of our discovery in our board meeting. If there's something that interests us, so we better. This isn't the time to try to go through discovery and ask clarifying questions. But I appreciate it. But I think in the interest of time, we better get our some of these actionable items on the position side. Vice Chair Davis.
yes, thank you. I have a motion that I just sent a final editing one, Angie, to you. I don't know if you have that last one. I send it to you after that. After that one, I sent, it's the last email. I just moved 2 words to the top. Yep, that's it. I move that the board I move that the board, considering the potential impacts to an LEA's maintenance of effort, requests that staff work with the sponsors of HB 113 and SB 118 on a special education funding bill to include, if prudent, 1, an adjusted prevalence cap, 2, a removal of the LEA growth cap, 3, a continuation of the 1.53 WPU multiplier for the special education add-on, and 4, an adjustment to the growth years and foundation calculation, and B, oppose first sub Senate Bill 134 and direct staff to work with the sponsor to align the bill language with federal special education law and guidance and federal uniform guidance if the sponsor is open to amendments.
Second.
Member Straight was a second. Is that what I heard?
Clear.
Okay, you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. We have 2 bills that are on special ed funding that are out there right now. That one we heard last week from Representative Judkins that does some of these things, and the other from Senator Fillmore that does some of these things, but they also do some other things. And I know we have heard expressed by staff has worked with them a little bit, and they've expressed that they're going to be meeting, I believe, next week to look at a potential combination of these bills. I can speak more to the details on these if anybody has any questions, but in the interest of time, that's kind of where we're going to go on that for the first piece. And then for the second piece on SB 134, it's I had our AAGs review and compare this bill to the one last year that is essentially the exact same bill that we opposed last year. And this year, instead of just a solid oppose, I think that we ought to try to work with the bill sponsor, because he has said he believes that his bill language aligns with the intent of the federal government guidance and law. And so, but the language is different enough that we believe it creates a double standard, a dual standard for reporting and such with our LEAs. So thus the piece to put in to work on that. But as it stands, it definitely would create a problematic dual documentation.
Vice Chair Davis, is that correct on the B? Would it be oppose or opposes? Isn't it oppose with an S?
It's correct. I said it incorrectly. I apologize. It would be the board opposes. The board opposes first sub.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. All right, plural. Okay. All right. We have a motion. I've got hands raised. Does anyone with your hands raised want to speak to this motion, or are you just reserving your spot in the queue? Okay, Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Vice Chair Davis for all the work and information that she has gathered on this. And I absolutely support both A and B. So thank you, Vice Chair Davis.
Okay, any other discussion to this motion? We have.
I'm in the queue, but I do want to make a comment. I actually would like to make a motion that we divide A and B.
Okay, a motion to divide. Is there a second?
Second.
Hymas?
Yep.
Chair, do you want to have the body vote on that? Or sorry.
That?
I just wasn't sure if you were just going to take a vote on the motion to divide, and then if we'll separate it out.
I'm going to take a motion to divide, or a motion is to divide. So prepare to vote on us. The motion for the board is to divide. All those in, or not, all those,
Speak on a motion to divide?
this is on a motion to divide.
Do we need to speak on a motion to divide? Or not?
Do you want to speak to it?
I'm just wondering if we need to ask for people. I would speak against it, but I'm just wondering if we need to ask for people or if you just go straight to a vote. I don't.
I think, is there any discussion on a motion to divide? People can speak against and that, but they can also vote. I'm not seeing any hands raised for that discussion, so the motion for the board is to divide. So board members at this time, for the motion to divide, please vote. Okay, I'm seeing member Moss, member Earl, member Hymas, member Hart, member Klein in support, and the rest are not. So the motion to divide fails. Is that how you see it, vice chairs?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So anyone else want to speak to the motion fails? Does anyone, okay, member Lear.
I wonder if it would be a friendly amendment, Member Davis, to say opposes as written on B.
Yes, that's fine.
Do you think you need to, since it says first sub?
But it's also said it's
I
without any object. Is a second good?
I seconded it, yes.
Are you good, Vice Chair Davis, without? Okay.
I don't think it makes a difference one way or another.
Anyone else want to speak to the motion?
Can I speak just briefly?
Member Lear.
What I think it adds is an emphasis to the last part, where we oppose it because we'd like to work on the last part of it.
Okay. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the motion before the board. Where's the top part of that? Oh, there isn't any more than that. Okay. The motion is the board under A, consider the potential impacts of the LEA's maintenance of effort, and when we request the staff work with the sponsors of House Bill 113 and Senate Bill 118 on a special education funding bill to include, if prudent, number one, an adjustment prevalence cap, number two, removal of the LEA growth cap, number three, a continuation of the 1.53 WPU multiplier for the special education add-on, and number four, an adjustment to the growth years and foundation calculation, and under B, opposes as written first substitute Senate Bill 134 and direct staff to work with the sponsors to align the bill language with federal special education law and guidance and federal uniform guidance if the sponsor is open to amendments. Board members at this time, please vote. Okay, will you guys leave your marks back up there? The motion passes with the no votes being member Moss, member Earl, member Hymas, member Klein.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Member Lear.
Another motion?
Yes.
Are we doing this in key?
Oh, yeah, Jenny was ahead of me in queue, if you care.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just writing them down as I see them. Member Earl.
Yes, I'd like a motion for us to support, sorry, let me pull these up. Senate Bill 114, Public School Curriculum Requirements. Should have given everybody a week to look at that. And then I have two others to add to that list. It's SCR 5, concurrent resolution honoring 125th anniversary of the National Parent Teacher Association. And my other one.
Are these some, okay, our writer's getting it.
Yep, hold on just a second. I have the other number in front of me. I got to go back to where I texted Jeff. And SJR 6. On the list, let's see, anyways, let me get the number in front of me. I apologize. I had it up at one point and I've clicked back and forth through bills.
Motion to divide, Chair, when that's in order.
Well, I've got to get a second. But
SJR 6 is joint resolution promoting the 3 R's framework of rights, responsibility, and respect in classroom by Senator Owens.
Okay, do we have a second? I don't have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, just that the more I'm reading about a variety of things, including our curriculum coming out, not our curriculum, our standards coming out, it's very important that we make sure that there's elements built into the locals, the LEAs for curriculum. I think this just adds an exclamation point on the need for that, have a process and go through that. And then the other 2 are just in supports for just the one for parent engagement, parent interaction through the PTA, and the other through the rights and responsibilities. Just the language in here I think is very powerful. So those are the reason why I'd ask those that we support those.
Okay, then we board member Blair.
I had a motion to divide.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
And in Robert's rules, it's not debatable, but so it's an opportunity. So I don't know how you debate an opportunity to divide. So with that, I'm going to call. We have a motion and a second to divide. Let's see if the body wants to divide. So that's a motion before the board right now. I'm going to call for a vote. Motion to divide. The motion passes to divide with the no votes being member Huntsman, Hanson, Hymas, Belknap. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the motion passes. So the first motion is, please highlight, it's the A, that the board support first substitute SB 114 public school curriculum requirements. Okay, Vice Chair Belknap.
So Chair, I'm not going to vote for or against this because I think that there's still a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes, and especially with who maybe is potentially the House sponsor on this. Thank you.
Okay, Member Norton.
I would be speaking against this. I think it puts an undue responsibility on both classroom educators, principals, and school boards, school districts to get all of this information online far, far in advance. And it also takes away the opportunity to teach to teachable moments. If it's not on that curriculum list, it's not on that schedule, then it shall not be taught. And I think that takes a lot away from education as it's currently written.
Okay, Member Straight.
Yes, I just want to clarify, last week when we didn't take this up, it wasn't because I needed more time to look at it. It was because I wasn't in agreement with it at that time, and I'm still not. And so, I don't want to speak for or against. I'm going to vote no on this, but I'm hopeful that things will keep moving forward and something that is acceptable will come out of this. But where it is right now, still against it.
Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. I won't be voting on this today because I have heard that another bill of a similar nature is coming out by, I believe, Representative Stratton, but I want to wait and see what the language looks like and to see how it's the same or different, because I think there's some nebulousness in how the instructional curriculum and the supplemental, or sorry, wrong word. There's no word curriculum in there. Instructional materials and supplemental materials can be interpreted within this particular amendment. So I'm on hold until we see this next one.
Okay, Member Moss.
I express support for this because I think as framed, and I do understand there are discussions in the works, but I think it does a good job of putting the conversation where it belongs, which is at the school and district level. And I think currently the way supplemental materials is defined provides a lot of latitude for these on the fly decisions that teachers need to make. It provides an opportunity up front for discussion of those things that are going to be locked in and approved by the district. But I do think it took into account, after a lot of input, the need for teachers to decide. And there it simply puts at the district the ability to choose whatever policy they see fit. So I like the balance, but I do look forward to seeing what else comes up. Thanks.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis, or let's see, Member Hutchings.
I took my hand down, but I just want to say I'm going to oppose this now for the same reasons that have been expressed. I would like to support this, but I can't at this point.
Member Hutchings. Not.
Well, no, the next person.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. I wish these would just pop up as I go to right, and then all of a sudden these hands are up. There's a way to have these in order. Member Hanson.
I'll have to vote no on this today, just because it's still evolving and I'm not ready to support it until I see where things land. I think abstaining may result in us having a vote of support, which I don't think is proper at this time.
No vote. An abstention is a no vote.
Member Klein.
I just want to express my support for this for the same reasons as Board Member Moss. I think it's a good bill in striking the balance and putting more of the weight of the work on the districts and allowing parents to be part of that process as well. And then giving the districts the opportunity to make their own policy for the supplemental materials. So supports the local control while also giving parents a say. And I appreciate that about it.
Okay, Member Lear. You're muted.
I oppose it as it's currently written for the same reasons that have been expressed. And I'm willing to see how it evolves. But I think the most important element that's getting, I think, lost and minimized in this bill are local board members. That's how we speak in a representative democracy. So I don't support this as written.
Okay, I just, on this particular motion, I still have 4 hands raised. Member Straight, are you adding to anything to this? Vice Chair Davis, are you? That's a no.
I'm in queue for a new motion.
Okay, well, we're not going to have very many of those because we're running out of time, by the way. Member Lear, your hand's raised too.
Same reason I want to be in the queue because I deferred to Jenny.
Okay, so before I state the motion, I just want to know so that you recognize the opportunity that's as I read this motion,
I speak to the motion.
I'm going to restate the motion, but before I do, I just want to, for clarity, so that you know what you're voting on. The motion is to support. A motion, a no vote does not say that I don't support it. It's just that you are not moving. It takes 8 that you're voting on a motion to support. So whether you abstain or put a no, it's the motion is all about moving this forward in a position of support. It is not if it fails, it's not a motion of opposition. Okay, so the motion before the board, and we're going to vote on this. After
Can I speak to my motion? Is that?
Oh, did you already speak to it? I
Yeah.
thought you spoke to him once before the divide. You didn't? I'm sorry.
I had wanted to make a comment here, just because I do think that there's a number of items out there when it comes to different materials and things used. And I don't think this is as messy as we think. And there is that concern, as Board Member Norton has expressed, about getting involved in all those details. I think this is still clear. I think if it's decided by the local LEA, that falls into one category. If it's materials used in the classroom, that it should be able to be accessible and used. So if there are additional amendments, I look forward to seeing those. But I do think the way this stands, it is very clear that we're supporting that transparency element. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to vote on this motion that the board supports first substitute SB 114 public school curriculum requirements. Board members, please vote at this time. Okay, will you please leave your hands up? Or not your hands up, your checks in place. We're going to have to do a roll call, I believe, on this. Okay, you guys
I
ready?
have 4 yeses, Chair,
That's what I've got 4 yeses.
and 1 abstention.
And who abstained?
Vice Chair Davis.
There's 2. Isn't there 2 that abstained?
Just me, I guess.
And
1.
Chair, there are 8 no's.
Okay. All right, so we can do the math. The ones that were support, can they be called out?
Yeah, I can call them out, Chair.
Yes.
Board Member Moss, Board Member Klein, Board Member Earl, and Board Member Hymas. And Board Member Hart had to run for an emergency, so she'll be back. So she didn't vote.
The motion does not pass. Okay, the next motion that's before us is that the board support SCR 5 concurrent resolution honoring 125th anniversary of the National Parent Teacher Association. This is all part of the divide. Is there any discussion to the motion? I see people that are in the queue.
Did you call on me? My mic wasn't working.
So Vice Chair David or Vice Chair Belknap?
Can you tell me who is sponsoring this resolution? Is it Senator Owens as well?
It's Milner.
Thank you. I wasn't sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, Member Straight, are you in the queue or are you going to speak to this? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Anybody with a hand raised to debate, so we're going to vote on that. The motion is that the board support SCR 5 concurrent resolution honoring 125th anniversary of the National Parent Teacher Association. Board members at this time, please vote.
I'm abstaining. Member Klein.
Member Hart is not with us, is that correct?
She's not back yet, Chair.
Okay,
you.
so, but the motion passes with Member Hart not participating in the vote and one abstain. Is that how
Board
you
Member
do it?
Klein. Yeah, Board Member Klein.
Oh, Member Klein.
Abstained.
Abstain. Thank you. Okay, the next motion, as part of the divide, is that the board support SJR 6 joint resolution promoting the, is that how you pronounce it, the 3RS framework of rights, which is the 3 Rs, which is rights, responsibility, and respect in classroom. Discussion to the motion. See no hands raised. We're going to vote on this, and the motion is that the board support SJR 6 joint resolution promote the 3 Rs framework for rights, responsibility, and respect in classrooms. Board members at this time, please vote. I believe Member Hart still isn't back with us, and the motion passes unanimously. Is that?
I didn't see Board Member Hansen's vote.
No, I abstained. I'm not familiar with this 3 Rs framework. I've read the bill, but I just abstain.
Thank you.
Okay. Member Straight.
Board Member Lear's actually ahead of me.
Well, I'm not seeing her
Yep,
hand.
It kept coming down.
Yeah,
But there you go.
it was, as much as I would like it.
I think it's
There you
Board
go.
Member, I think it's Board Member Lear, Board Member Straight, and then Vice Chair Davis in the order, Chair.
Yeah, Board Member Lear.
I'd like to move that the board support the bills that the board asked the staff to work on with the legislature. And there are 4 of them: SB 145, HB 265, HB 290, HB 256.
Second, Board Member Booth.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Board Member Lear, do you want to speak to your motion?
Briefly, we've talked a lot about all of these. We've supported them. I think we leave the staff hanging if we ask them to work with the sponsor and then we are not firmly behind them as a board. Even if individually board members vote no, I understand that, but I think as a board, we need to take action on them.
Okay, discussion to the motion. Got. Would you guys raise your hand if you want to discuss to the motion? Vice Chair Belknap, Hutchings, and Earl, and Moss. I'm just trying to get the queue figured out here.
Sorry. Did you call on me, Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I actually, I just don't see a lot of need for this because we already have asked staff, and when they present that the legislators are saying this was a board's ask, and so it's assumed that, but I'm not going to not support that for that reason, but we don't have to do that since we ask for these.
So can I ask a question, Chair, then, as the maker of the motion?
Yeah, you're the maker of the motion. Yeah.
I wish then we would get some clarity about that, Laura, because I feel like that is not necessarily the case. And if that is true, then we should put an S by every one of those and not ever have to address them again.
Well, and it might be something we deal with policy in the future, or there's other ways to resolve. But that's implied in it when you're there in committee and as these things are moving forward, it was at the board's request. So this
should be a quick vote then.
This could be a quick vote. Okay. Member Earl. Oh, who did I miss? Hang on. Hutchings. Sorry.
I move to divide.
Is there a second?
Second, Moss.
Okay. Motion to divide. It's coming before the body. Board members, at this time, the motion before you is to divide. Please vote. I'm not seeing enough yes votes to divide. So the yes votes are Moss, Earl, Hymas, Hutchings, Vice Chair Davis.
Correct.
Okay. The motion fails. Okay, the motion before the board is the board supports the following bills related to the board approved request for statutory changes. Senate Bill 145, reading competency benchmark assessment, House Bill 265, charter school agreements and renewals, House Bill 290, school readiness amendments, and House Bill 256, farm to school programs. Any further discussion on the bills? Vice Chair Davis? Earl, are you wanting to discuss too? You guys raise your hand. Raise your hand to be in the queue and then also to discuss. So Vice Chair Davis?
Well, I'm embarrassed because maybe I should have more carefully fine-tooth combed all of these, but is there someone that could just give us a quick summary? I don't remember us voting to ask for these to be asked for, but I'm probably totally forgetting and I don't remember the key components in the bills.
So, Deputy Superintendent Stallings, can you respond to the questions? Were these legislative asks?
Yes, so I did speak to the first two, I think, so I'll just go to the third one. HB 290 school readiness assessments makes mostly technical changes to our school readiness or preschool program. The biggest substantive change it does is it aligns criteria for private preschools and public preschools to have the same criteria for time for their teachers to become quality or to be licensed. Currently public school, so preschools located with a district or charter school, their teachers had to be certified or quality much quicker than a private, so that it aligns that. It makes some other changes about aligning standards and standard changes. And then HB 256 farm to school program, and this is where Jeff is going to review this one. I believe it requires the two other offices, the Department of Health and the Department of Ag, to also have FTE to support the farm to school program. We already have someone in our office. And so maybe Jeff could supplement if I missed any.
Jeff,
yes.
Did we miss something here?
It incentivizes local purchases of food for school cafeterias, so using Utah farmers to buy your produce, etc.
Do you have a follow-up, Vice Chair Davis? You're muted.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Okay. Member Earl.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this motion.
Want to postpone or table?
Tabled.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Board Member Klein.
Okay. You want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I just think there's some components to some of these that I think we need to be vetted a little bit more. I think for today that we just table this motion.
Hey, anyone else with their hands raised want to speak to the motion to table? Not seeing any. So we have a motion before the board, a motion to table. All board members at this time, please vote. There's 7 yes votes. Member Moss, Earl, Hymas, Straight, Hutchings, Vice Chair Davis, Natalie Klein. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That's 7.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, the motion
Fails.
fails. Okay, motion to, that's on the table. Let's see. Member, let's see, who was the last to speak? Oh, it's okay. It's Vice Chair, or no, it's Member Hutchings.
If there were 7 for it, didn't it mean that we're tabling it? Did I miss that?
Need 8.
You gotta have 8.
Jenny.
Oh,
8 or more
gotcha.
to move a motion forward.
Okay.
Member Hutchings.
Chair, I have my hand up.
Thank you.
It's not showing, and I made the motion. Carol.
Hang on.
I see your hand.
What are you saying, Carol, that you want to speak to?
Hey,
the
I
motion?
my hand up to speak to this motion that I made, and I keep getting not called on, and I don't know if my hand.
Okay. Yeah, it's really hard to keep track on this, but Chair Huntsman, the maker of the motion would like to speak to her motion.
Okay, so that's good to wave your hand. I didn't know if you was in line or not to make another, but go ahead, Member Lear.
I again implore you, we've sent staff out in support of these bills. 2 motions to try to get them divided or struck down have failed. Let's support the bills that we sent the staff to work with sponsors on so that we don't leave them looking silly and the board looking so undecided or so uncertain.
Okay.
And substantively, they're all, I'm not saying that purely procedurally. They're all substantively good bills that we've had under consideration for a long, and the issues have been under consideration and discussion for a long time.
All right. So the motion that's, we're speaking to the motion that's before the board. Member Hutchings.
Yep. Thank you. I'd like to make a comment and then a motion. I understand the concept that we asked staff to work on this legislation, but my challenge is now that we see the legislation, I'm not in favor of one of these on the list. So let me explain that. HB 265, charter school agreements and renewals. The discussion in our board meeting when we did vote to approve this was that we and I don't remember the exact motion, but that we would have legislation responsive to the charter school audit. And the original motion was that it includes something about renewals. We had a discussion, we had a vote, and we removed the part about the renewals. Now we look at HB 265, and it goes back to what the board actually voted against, specifying in saying charter school agreements and renewals. There are parts of the charter school audit that are not addressed in this bill. And so we're going back, and I just at this point I can't vote in favor of that one because it doesn't fall in line with my understanding of what the board actually asked staff to do in relation to the charter school audit. Part of the charter school audit did recommend renewals, but it also recommended a restructure of how the state charter board reports to I'll just say the reporting structure of this state charter board. And this bill does not address that. And so that's my challenge in this, is that now that the legislation has come out, it doesn't agree with what I believe the board voted on when we approved, when we made this recommendation. And now you're asking me to vote on this. You're probably better off just not having this vote and letting the legislature assume and just say that we voted, refer to the previous vote of the board, than now asking us to vote on it again, because now I can't vote in favor of this because HB 265 is not what I voted on or what I remember the board having had in discussion and ended up approving. And so with that said, my motion is to remove HB 265 from this consideration.
Which falls in alignment with an amendment to add or take away. So your amended motion is to remove House Bill 265.
The maker of the motion would agree to that. Reluctantly, I think this is desperately needed, and I think Representative Snow has been very brave to do this, and I think we're picking at nits, but I would agree to that if it gets the other three off dead center.
Okay. Do we have a second to the proposed amendment?
Second, Moss.
And I think you've already spoke to your amendment, proposed amendment, Member Hutchings. Do you want to speak more? And I think your screen is frozen. I'm not hearing you. Are you with us? Member Hutchings?
I think she might be frozen, Chair.
I think so. So just, we have a second discussion to this amendment. Member Moss, and then Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's procedurally inaccurate and perhaps sidelining members in our obligation to review specific bills to suggest that when we direct staff to explore opportunities, that implies approval of whatever particular bill comes out of that discussion or exploration. And so I think it's highly appropriate for our staff to reach out and discuss, but I think we risk being sidelined. Again, as Member Hutchings, I don't want to, duplicate, but a lot of things can come from those discussions. I think we need the opportunity to come back and look at what comes out of that discussion. And so I support, I'm not going to speak to 265. I hope we have an opportunity to do that if this motion passes, but I think procedurally, this is the right approach. We need to be able to review and discuss and vote on a particular bill rather than imply support from a general prior direction to explore opportunities.
Vice Chair Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. If you'll note that Angie put the motion in the chat box, and it said the motion before the board was to amend the code related to issues raised in the legislative audit. And so it wasn't specific or non-specific what the board voted on. The other piece of that is that in the audit, it didn't give the board direction as how to relate to governance of the charter relating to us, them reporting to us or the legislator. That was for the legislators to come up with that. And that is not something that we have been working on. And so we not only has our staff been working with Representative Snow, but also the charter leadership has also been working on this. And so I think it's a real dangerous precedence that we set to maybe not vote on something that we have asked for, and it's very clear in detail. It is straight from the audit that we approved for them to work on. Thank you.
Okay, any other, would someone just show me that the motion, the amendment to the motion is to remove, there's a motion to amend the motion to support by removing House Bill 265 charter school agreement renewals from the motion to support. That is what's before us. I'm not seeing any other discussion. So you guys understand this is to remove it from the original motion that Member Lear voted on. So maybe I better say it again so you know what you're voting, so that we all know what we're voting for. And it's a motion to amend the motion to support by removing House Bill 265 charter school agreements and renewals from the motion to support. Board members at this time, please vote. This is to remove. Okay, there's 7 yes votes to remove. So the motion fails. The yeses were Hymas, Cannon, Hanson, Moss, Klein, Lear, and Earl. Is that what you guys see?
That's what I see, Chair.
Okay.
I see Board Member Hanson as a yes.
He did state that.
I
Thank you,
stated
Ms.
that.
Cannon.
Okay. The motion before the board that's on the table now is that the board support the following bills related to the board approved requests for statutory changes. Number 1, Senate Bill 145, reading competency benchmark assessment, House Bill 265, charter school agreements and renewals, House Bill 290, school readiness amendments, and House Bill 256, farm to school program. Member Moss, your hand is raised.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Chair. I support a lot of what's in here. I have to vote no because I don't think it's the appropriate way for us to review and express a yay or nay. Legislature is going to do what it's going to do. They have the right to do that. And so the question here is just whether we support it. And I don't think this is teed up in a procedural way that gives me the opportunity to really weigh in. I do have opposition to 265, but I won't elaborate it here. I think it's got some great ideas. It's just something where the charter community is divided and we haven't had an in-depth discussion about those divisions of opinion. So I expressed previously how some other things are already in the works. We had to give them some time, but I just wanted to state that I'm not necessarily opposed to the others. It just really doesn't give us the best opportunity to dig in and express how we consider each one of these for the consideration of the legislature. Thanks.
Okay, Member Lear.
I'll withdraw the motion. I think it is unfortunate that those who support charter schools can't support improvements that Representative Snow brings forward, but I don't want the others to be unsupported by the board because of that. So I know it's the body's motion, but I would move to withdraw the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Can you put a motion to postpone?
Sure. Help indefinitely.
that would be the best? I mean, is that the best way to do that with our parliamentary specialists? Here would be a motion to postpone.
You can do a motion to postpone indefinitely, or you can, if the maker of the motion withdraws the motion, it is as if the motion was never made and you just move on in the agenda.
Okay.
And that's probably what I prefer.
You probably prefer to withdraw, correct?
Right. I don't want the others to fail because of this one frustration.
Okay.
Chair, I'm not sure that she can withdraw. Jeff, I don't believe that's true once it belongs to the body.
Well, it goes to the body as soon as there's a second.
Right.
The full body does have to give permission for the withdrawal. I apologize.
Thank you.
So that's where I'm at. So do we have the maker of the motion wishes to withdraw? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, now it's before the full body to withdraw. Any more discussion on to have this on this motion? You guys raise your hand. This is seeing none. This is going to be the last. Oh, member Vice Chair Belknap.
Yes, I just wanted to be clear that we worked with the charter board leader, state charter school board leadership on this and worked heavily with them. So it isn't that the charter world is against this. Maybe some are. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, member Booth.
I know we're short on time. I simply have to go on record as I certainly understand that perhaps the system is not allowing, as Board Member Moss indicated, us to come back after staff has worked hard with legislators. But I don't want, we're talking about people here who have invested lots of time and lots of effort to be supportive of what was perceived to be our board action in previous meetings. I just want to go on record as saying thank you to the legislators who are willing to be our partners. Thank you to the staff who try to figure what in the heck that board is thinking about when they give them these assignments and trying to make sense of it all and then work hard to deliver it and to build understanding among those with whom they have been assigned to labor. And I just want the staff, superintendent, our associate superintendents, up and down the board to not feel that we're just chewing them up and spitting them out. They are appreciated. They are doing great work. If we haven't clearly communicated, then we need to figure out the process that will allow the communication to take place. And we need to take responsibility if we've made a mistake or if the system that we've set up is not working. It's not staff's fault. It's not the legislators' fault. They are trying hard to come our direction, meet us halfway in what we're trying to accomplish for Utah's kids. So sorry that got a little bit passionate. I just want to say thank you. And we have to recognize that there has been a lot of water under the bridge since we approved this. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak to this? Okay, the motion before the board is that to withdraw this motion. Board members at this time, please vote. Okay, the motion passes. We have 2 no votes. Member Straight, Member Norton, was there, am I seeing that correct?
And Member Booth.
And Member Booth, there it is. Thank you. Okay, Board members, at this time, we're way behind. We've got, I think, some lessons learned as we're moving into our next week's legislative meeting to do our very best to try to have motions prepared. We're going to move to item number 8, which is lunch. It is 1:36. We'll meet at 2:06, and then we'll come back to our agenda.